I'm Barbara Norman. I'm the Director of Canberra Urban and Regional Futures, and it's my great pleasure to chair this evening. The title is, as you will know, New Energy Futures from Policy to Action. And it's the game in town this week, at a national level, at a local level, and at a regional level, whatever your perspective. And obviously the big issue in town this week is the carbon price debate in Parliament. So we'll watch with interest. We have three excellent speakers tonight, but before I introduce them, I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people, both past and present, their elders and any Indigenous people who are here tonight. And also I'd like to acknowledge Dorte Eklund as Director General of ESS, Emma Thomas, who heads a challenging but fantastic role with Canberra Metro and the light rail, and our Environment Commissioner, Rob, and it's just Neil, I can't believe it because we see each other all the time. It's getting up at dawn this morning, driving up from the coast, and a number of other colleagues here. So thank you all for coming. So maybe a smaller crowd, but a very good crowd. As I said, we've got three speakers. I'll be very quick so I don't take up the time. We've got Dr. Frank Jotzo, ANU, who's one of our leading national experts on environmental economics. And you'll hear a lot from Frank in the national media, I think, this week on the carbon price. We've got Zhou, who's the General Manager at Zhenfa, who's here really giving an industry perspective. And I'd also like to acknowledge Maurice Zhou, who's the Managing Director of Zhenfa, who's here for Australia. So he's happy to answer questions as well. And Liz Veitch, who I've known for a long time, and a student here at the University of Canberra, now works for the Regional Development Australia in the ACT, but here in her capacity as Chair of the South East Region of Renewable Energy Excellence, CURF. There's a lot of CURFs and variations, but this is this CURF. And she's be speaking from a community perspective and a network perspective and an industry cluster perspective and a whole, yeah, exactly, collaboration. So we've got about 10 minutes each, so there's plenty of time for Q&A. So this session will go for about 1 hour, and then we invite you to continue the conversation with our three speakers over a drink and some nibbles, as we always have this format each time. So it's part of a series from CURF, and delighted that we're focusing on this one tonight. May I invite, I think, Zhou, you're going first.
Good evening, stakeholders of Canberra, regional areas and Greater Australia. It is an honour for me to speak here today at the Canberra Urban and Regional Futures, hosted by the University of Canberra. It is great to see so many people from the renewable energy industry, the government and educational institutions today. Zhenfa has been involved with renewable energy development within Canberra since 2011 during the small and medium scale feed-in tariff scheme. In 2012, the company made a commitment to invest into the territory for a large-scale solar farm that would fall within the ACT solar auction scheme. Zhenfa was a successful proponent through the regular stream, and this announcement was made August 2013. By 2014, we have invested and developed more than 600 megawatts of solar farms and have performed the engineering, procurement and construction role for over 1.5 gigawatts of solar farm in China. We operate and maintain most of the solar farms which we engineer and build, and have plans to increase our IPP, independent power producing platform in China, to hold more assets. Our vision is a world in which we coexist through sustainable means, because we believe that the collaboration and cooperation of community, industry and government is important not just locally, but internationally. Our mission is to deliver and integrate into society the most affordable renewable energy systems through economic and environmentally sustainable development. This can be done through mechanisms such as the ACT government's feed-in tariff schemes and the collaboration between industry and local economic investment. In this presentation, we discuss our approach on this mission as guided by the policies and challenges which we face here in Australia. Every renewable energy generator faces the fate of intermittent generation of energy and the challenge of balancing supply and demand of power generated that seeks to minimize the cost of electricity over the long term. Moving forward, it will no longer be a matter of simply connecting a renewable energy generator into the grid. Zhenfa is committed to assist the ACT government in its Canberra urban solar project as developed under Action 6 of AP2, which seeks to increase the penetration of solar PV technology with electricity storage and control systems that will address many of solar's intermittent generation challenges. Zhenfa has begun investigation into the feasibility and viability of integrating large-scale solar energy storage that will be connected to the Magalang Solar Park so that the energy generated throughout the day can be stored and released during periods of higher demand. We have the intention of augmenting the completed solar farm with this technology within a year after the initial plan has been commissioned. We believe that effective planning and development of renewable energy generation will be a collaborative exercise with town planning, utilities, and grid operators, and we encourage these partners to be as transparent as possible with providing information that may assist developers with the correct sizing, location, and type of power generation. Similar to large-scale infrastructure assets, investors and banks' perception of renewable energy assets have overall improved both locally and globally, leading to a significant decrease in the cost of capital and levelized cost of electricity. We believe that through building ongoing relationship and confidence with investors and lenders both locally and internationally will further reduce the cost of capital. In addition to this, the ACT government offers generous Treasury financial guarantees to investors and lenders of renewable energy projects to increase the bankability of these assets. While this may be an option today, there is room for sophisticated lenders to absorb sovereign risks once they have overcome the dilemma of climate change themselves. Many Australian infrastructure funds and yieldcos have taken on new positions with climate change by proactively seeking investment opportunities within the space of renewables. And we can see that this sector will be further supplemented by the increase of super funds within Australia alone. Finally, the concept of community-owned long-term assets will become a reality with the ACT government's community solar scheme. The scheme will set the foundation of many future renewable energy projects that seek to attract local investors who are substantially more confident with local government than those from afar. Under this scheme, Zhenfa will commit its efforts to securing a 1 megawatt community-owned solar farm to be located alongside the Magalang Solar Park, which is positioned for both convenience and technical accessibility. We are working together with the greater community in securing investment and pledges for this solar farm and aim to have a development application in later this year. We have found that while working with local utilities and regulators, that many equipment and installation techniques which are developed overseas are not necessarily applicable or suitable within the local market. We saw that while Australia has had its firm foot in the development of renewable energy technologies, there is a need for the support and teaching of practical deployment. Mid this year, the Australian government's Anti-Dumping Commission began an investigation into the potential dumping of crystalline silicon PV modules that came from the People's Republic of China. Several large manufacturers have been inquired, and a determination for this investigation is set for sometime early next year. The implications of an anti-dumping tariff could see the increase of up to 50% for the solar PV modules originating from China, which will lead to an increase in overall capital development costs. We believe that we can retain our students and skilled workers by providing the support and knowledge to teach local standards and regulations. We will do this through our graduate and apprenticeship programs in conjunction with educational institutions for positions that will be based here in Canberra. In the face of an anti-dumping tariff, we consider the feasibility and viability of local manufacturing. Will this make us competitive or comparable globally? The increase in labour costs over the last few years is a challenge we face globally. What was once an intensive process for module assembly has now become more autonomous and cost efficient. Moving forward with this idea, a local manufacturer faces two challenges. In a compliance and policy-driven market, what size of operation should we pursue? Where the bulk of the supply chain still resides overseas, what purchasing power do local manufacturers have in comparison to overseas manufacturers? As both a local citizen and developer, we are concerned with the economic impact of renewable energy power generation. We look at this from several angles which seek to approach this from both economic and environmentally sustainable development point of views. By providing the training and knowledge to contractors through local presence in conjunction with educational institutions, we can increase their utilization and thereby localize economic benefits as much as practicably possible. We see a great opportunity to entwine the business innovation and investment visa subclass 1A8 with overseas renewable energy investors to minimize economic leakage and drive local competency. Zhenfa is currently promoting this scheme to sophisticated investors from China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, where the pitch is really as simple as investing into and living in a healthy and sustainable future. We are already seeing sustainability as a measurable index for urban planning being developed not only here in the ACT, but across Australia and in China. We see that there is potential for further development and planning for economic zones that seek to attract renewable energy deployments. Through collaboration between community, industry, and government, we will be able to determine the most suitable areas for deployment and thereby reducing overall development risk. When we know how much it all costs, will tendering continue to be the only way? Zhenfa takes the position of a facilitator. To conclude, Zhenfa takes the position of a facilitator and advocate for renewables, regardless of whether it's solar, wind, biomass, or any engineering technology, because we believe that the future of Australia's energy mix will be a combination of localized generation that matches demand. Zhenfa has and will continue to develop renewable energy projects with social responsibility as its primary focus. Our commitment to the territory thus far can be demonstrated by the most affordable large-scale solar PV technology in Australia through the reverse auction. How much more affordable this technology can be will be determined by collaboration and cooperation with community, industry, and government. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and hope you enjoyed Liz's presentation, where there is a strong focus on community and collaboration.
Thank you, Barbara, for this wonderful opportunity to be part of tonight's CURF seminar. And hello, I am Liz Veitch and the chair of CERE, an initiative to empower the renewable energy industry using this Southeast New South Wales ACT region as an exemplar of renewable energy excellence. So tonight's topic promotes discussion around how best to translate policy into action and to build a new energy future. It's the governments that set the policy, and it's then up to industry to interpret that government policy to its best advantage, to identify the opportunities that can stem from the challenges and to take action accordingly. One of the main challenges for the renewable energy sector is to ensure the sustainability of its industry. To achieve this, we first need to construct a solid foundation upon which to build the industry's ongoing growth and development. Global best practice suggests that a sustainable model is one in which benefit is shared equally around all its stakeholders. There's a lot of them: the industry proponents, the utilities and retailers, the end users, the researchers and innovators, the financiers, local businesses and contractors, landholders hosting the infrastructure, and the neighbouring and surrounding communities. The collaborative CERE model provides the solution to this imposing industry sustainability challenge. Okay, the CERE initiative will transition on the 1st of September to form a regional renewable energy industry cluster. Very exciting. A network of stakeholders who together are depositing and sharing in a wealthy bank of accumulated knowledge, the basis upon which to further develop the renewable energy sector. CERE's objectives are to build renewable energy capacity by attracting a sustainable flow of new investment and new jobs into the region, developing a regional workforce with the skills necessary to meet the needs of the industry now and into the future, to facilitate the research, development and deployment of innovative renewable energy technologies, to strengthen the wellbeing of regional communities and foster public support for renewable energy projects, and then to share this regional model of renewable energy excellence. Well, at the core of most of us here this evening is a personal, compelling drive to contribute to the sustainability of the natural environment and to add amenity to the lives of those who manage the land, our natural environment. And so CURF was born. CURF activities are targeted to address the challenges for the renewable energy industry. We have brought together a network of some 400 of the region's renewable energy stakeholders. We've provided foundational knowledge by mapping and scoping the region's existing and future capacity for renewable energy development, and CURF will shortly be publishing this accumulated wealth of knowledge in the form of a regional renewable energy strategic plan that will also map the optimal way forward for the sector. CURF also organises events including business forums, high-level roundtables and everyone's favourite Renewable Energy Day. So maybe yours, Chris. CURF activities, this is what we're hoping to do, is a renewable energy education tourism drive, a self-drive trail that will guide tourists and groups around the renewable energy infrastructure of the local region. We envisage big signs at the main entry points to Canberra. Welcome to Canberra, a city powered by renewable energy. That's something to be proud of. The result, an informed community that understands and appreciates renewable energy. The regional model for meeting the challenges and developing a region of renewable energy excellence is underpinned by having a broad range of stakeholders who operate within the tenets, this is a new thing I've learned, of collaborative competitivism, a term of endearment by industry cluster experts, recognising a context that is holistic and synergies to maximise benefit. The CURF region provides a unique challenge in developing a region of renewable energy excellence, the need to work across 2 jurisdictions, 2 sets of government policies. The genesis of the CURF initiative was actually born by looking at a map that looked something like that. You can understand why it prompted a rational rethink of the local renewable energy's regional boundaries. Realistically, this region cannot be viewed as a donut, New South Wales with an ACT-shaped hole in its middle. Rather, it needs to be viewed as a holistic, synergistic, cross-jurisdictional whole. Unlike states and local government areas, a region is not defined by legislated geographic borders. Rather, regions are defined by a shared sense of place and a common purpose or destiny. Thus, a region should be defined by its relevance to an issue or topic, and in this case, it's renewable energy. So, renewables in the ACT. The ACT government has legislated policy for a renewable energy target whereby 90% of the ACT's electricity will be sourced from renewable energy by 2020, a policy that is driving the impetus for lots of renewable energy activity in the ACT and region. Also important is the strength of the ACT's intellectual capital, particularly its world-class expertise in the research and development of new renewable energy technologies. Renewable energy in southeast New South Wales has a wealth of opportunity in its abundant natural energy resources, particularly wind, solar, hydro and biomass. This region is serendipitously located on the Sydney to Melbourne transition line, and its location around the ACT is a key driver for current industry development. New South Wales landholders now have a broader range of land use options for generating income beyond the more traditional farming choices, this is one for you, Charlie, of cropping and livestock production, such as growing plantation timber, hosting farm stays and ecotourism, and hosting renewable energy infrastructure. On a broader scale, Australia as a whole is blessed with a wealth of natural resources. In fact, we have more renewable energy resources per head of population than any other nation on Earth. And yet, there are many nations on Earth that have a stronger renewable energy industry. Why? Looking to learnings from global best practice takes us to Denmark. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark has provided this information. 91% of Danes consider Denmark should expand its use of wind power. 85% are happy for the expansion to take place in their local area. To have such a large proportion of its community so strongly supportive of renewables must be fabulous. So this is really the crux of the CURF model, is the diversity of its stakeholders and the collaborative way of bringing them together to share information. We've recognised that at the heart of most of the crucial collaborations is industry. So we look at industry and their need to collaborate with governments in the context of feeding into and implementing government policy and regulation, industry to regional businesses to ensure local investment and jobs, regional prosperity and livability, industry to research, supporting innovation, exploring the potential to commercialise new and developing technologies, with education and training, providing input to ensure training is relevant to meeting industry skills needs, and communities and landholders consulting and engaging communities to ensure the sustainability of the industry. So to quickly look at each group a little more closely, the federal government has announced its plan to scale back many of the former government's commitments and incentives to the renewable energy industry. For example, the current review of the renewable energy target, a major threat to Australia's renewable energy industry, undermining the security of investment into the sector. However, both the ACT and the New South Wales governments are continuing to build a strong policy environment to support and drive renewable energy industry opportunities. Local governments are in an invidious position, leading communities that are torn and divided over their renewable energy position. There is more work to be done around community engagement. Industry and regional businesses. It is through contracting regional businesses to work on local projects that industry can bring real economic benefit to the regions, developing local SMEs and offering training opportunities and jobs. We need to move away from that old FIFO, fly-in, fly-out model. What's the stake here? We estimate this region currently has over 3,000 megawatts of large-scale renewable energy projects in the development pipeline. This equates to a direct investment of some $6 billion plus dollars and results in some 4,000 construction jobs and 330 ongoing jobs, a major boost to regional economies. In dollar terms, the Clean Energy Council reports that a typical 50 megawatt wind farm of some 25 turbines employs a construction workforce of around 50 people, about $1.2 million spent in the local economy, and an ongoing workforce of at least 5 people. Typically, an annual rent to the host landholder of up to about $250,000, plus some $80,000 or so towards community enhancement funding. So, industry and research. I think it's wanting me to slow down. Research underpins innovation, new and developing technologies and smart ICT. Research innovation underpins the capacity of the renewable energy industry to compete with coal-fired power generation. For example, just a few weeks ago, 91% of the electricity demand in South Australia was met by wind energy. And ACT and region research institutions are leading global research into photovoltaics, concentrated solar and wind capacity mapping. Research innovation allows Australia to compete in the global market. New technologies such as those in wind turbine design, the Archimedes. It's not ours, but it's highly efficient and whisper quiet. Made by a company in Rotterdam, this unit will cost $5,400 when released in January, and a moderate breeze can power, and with the moderate breeze, can power half the energy needs of the average home. In this region, as with many, there is a correlation between the well-being of communities and their distance from their regional hub. Typically, as the distance from the regional centre increases, and with it, access to services such as education and health and employment opportunities, so does economic and social disadvantage. So this challenge of regional disadvantage can be addressed by the renewable energy industry, as supported skills training provides the capacity for local workers to fill job opportunities being created by the local projects. This also helps to reverse the trend of the regional youth leaving the country and heading off for the cities and not coming back. The challenge with education is to focus on aligning the needs of industry with the skills training being provided. The skills required on a job are not always specific to the renewable energy industry, but are often more general for engineers and for trades. And sometimes all that's needed is an overlay of specialisation for an electrician to get an additional certification to work with PVs. But industry and community, we've talked about determining a model for sharing benefit, a compromise that works for both. Landowners who actually host the infrastructure benefit financially, but at what cost, when their position in the community can become untenable. It is also apparent that communities want to be well informed about local projects, and this needs to happen at the early stages of the projects. Community concerns have been addressed by the ACT government that has weighted 20% of its current wind auction bid assessment against community engagement and another 20% on providing local economic benefit. Part of the solution could be around industry supporting community-owned renewable energy infrastructure, for example, the Hepburn Community Wind Farm and the ACT Solar Share that currently has over $1 million pledged towards a local community energy infrastructure project. This is one of my favourite photographs, the big blade heading off to Gullin through Goulburn. Okay, so final slide. We are agreed that the need to understand the challenges of the renewable energy sector before we can take actions that will optimise the opportunities. CERE has identified the challenges, ensuring government policy and regulation provides the capacity and stable environment to underpin industry development and to provide support for research innovation, to ensure regional benefit through developing the capacity of regional SMEs and regional workers, to ensure the sustainability of the industry through developing a model that shares benefit to the satisfaction of all sectors, to ensure communities are consulted early and well informed, and to instil appreciation for and uptake of renewable energy. This is the CERE brief, to take best advantage of the favourable policy conditions in place in this region and to empower its renewable energy stakeholders to take actions and optimise the outcomes for this region of renewable energy excellence. Thank you.
Yes, so thanks very much, Barbara. Thanks very much, everyone, for the 10 minutes I have. Yeah. I'll take a very big step back, okay, and ask, why renewable energy, right? So we've heard already about, the how and what it might mean for the region, but why, And it's actually good to think about what coal has done for us, because coal is a marvelous thing, right? I mean, coal kind of enabled the Industrial Revolution, and it's supplied very cheap electricity to Australia for a very long time. It's just that it is an entirely outdated fuel, because we now know that it has one giant bad side effect, and that is carbon dioxide emissions and climate change, and we can't really afford to put any more of that into the atmosphere. It also has quite enormous implications for local pollution, both where it's mined and where it's used in terms of air pollution. And we now have a whole range of studies that estimate the economic impact of air pollution from coal combustion, and those studies alone tell us that the benefits, the economic benefits in terms of avoided health impacts from coal use can be enormous. Coming back to the climate change theme, if we want to minimize the risks of climate change, then all the analyses tell us that at the heart of this is decarbonizing the energy system, and in particular decarbonizing the electricity supply system. How can we do that? Well, three ways really. First of all, carbon capture and storage from fossil fuel combustion. Secondly, nuclear power is without greenhouse gas emissions also. And thirdly, renewable energy sources, so all different kinds of renewables. And an exercise that I'm involved with for the United Nations at the moment, 15 countries producing their own roadmaps to deep decarbonization of their energy systems, shows that different countries are taking very different trajectories. Some think they will rely heavily on carbon capture and sequestration. Some think they will rely very heavily on nuclear power. Others think that the optimum way for them to go is to rely very heavily on renewables. In Australia, we could really do any of those things, right? So we're an energy superpower now in terms of the fossil fuel resources that we're using. We could be an energy superpower based on nuclear. We could be an energy superpower based on renewables. We've got ample of any of those things. It's just that in the comparison of those three, renewables are, relatively speaking, really kind of hands down the winner in Australia, right? Because the usual constraints apply to the others in terms of technical feasibility and costs for carbon capture and sequestration. In terms of cost, above everything, as well as concerns about safety and what do you do with the waste, et cetera, about nuclear. But with regards to renewables, we really don't have the same constraints as most other countries in the world have. Right? We've got a lot of sunshine, we've got a lot of land, we can put them where we want, we've got a lot of wind resource as well. Now, question though, should Canberra, should the ACT, should the capital region support renewable development in particular? So that's a much more complex question than the question whether Australia as a nation would find it a good idea to support the development and deployment of renewable power. So with the 90% renewables target in the ACT, I would argue the single biggest effect of it is really the demonstration effect. Okay? It's the signaling effect of one jurisdiction saying, look, within the space of half a decade or so, we can actually supply 90% of our electricity through renewable power that's either built within our jurisdiction or supported financially by us, by the population living in this jurisdiction. Okay? It also has a demonstration effect with regard to the economic mechanisms that can be used to get renewable installations built. So in particular, the large-scale solar scheme and soon to be the large-scale wind scheme with the auctions is an innovative scheme as regards Australia. It has been done in other countries, but not really at large scale in Australia before. And I think we can say that the results from the first solar auction indicate that it is successful because the winning bid is well below what was expected by the expert community and what was expected by government. And so, reasonable expectation is that the bids that will come in for subsequent auctions, as well as the bids for the wind auctions, will also be very competitive. However, it is still a cost. ACT government estimating that the additional cost on average per household in the ACT will peak at around $250 per year in the year 2020. So that's the additional cost imposed on electricity users in order for the ACT to fulfill this very ambitious renewable supply target. So $250 per household per year is not nothing, right? So this is a substantial commitment of financial resources by the population, by electricity users in particular, and I think it's worth bearing that in mind in making these policy decisions and in shaping policies. Second question in the sort of national versus territory interaction is, what if the federal government dismantles most or all of climate change related policy? Okay, so the carbon price is extremely likely to go, probably this week or so. Okay. There's big question marks over the future of renewable support policies at the federal level. Until very recently, it looked like the federal government was poised to cut, significantly water down the renewable energy target and abolish other institutions, financing bodies that support renewable energy. With the statement by Clive Palmer, things look perhaps a little different now, but it is clear that the longer term intent under the present federal government is to reduce the support for renewable energy federally. What will this do? Well, first of all, it will create an even stronger signaling effect for the ACT renewables energy policy. It'll be a lot more visible if and when federal climate change policy will be weakened or abolished. So in terms of the signaling effect, showing what can be done, putting up a flag if that's what we want to do, I think that effect will be significantly greater than it was before. In terms of the financial preconditions and financial effects, in my estimation, the removal of the carbon price federally and the prospective cutting of the renewable energy target would actually make it cheaper for the ACT to achieve the 90% renewables target. Cheaper for electricity users. First of all, because the removal of the carbon price will reduce electricity bills. That will be, an effect that may well dominate other effects. Then there's a whole lot of complex interactions between the renewable energy target, what that means for the amount of renewables that the ACT would procure in order to fulfill the 90% target. In net terms, that may also be a slight reduction in costs to the ACT. And thirdly, we would expect greater competition between the providers of renewable energy, simply because the market overall in Australia shrinks. And I think that would be something that I would be really interested in getting your feedback on, just what the market for renewable energy provision will actually look like if and when the feds withdraw from that to a significant extent. I'll end here, and thanks very much again.
My question is to Liz. I know there's quite a bit of support for renewable energy, but how do you envisage engaging the community that aren't so interested?
Have you got a mic?
Thank you. Okay, I think projects like the Renewable Energy Trail that really promote the profile of renewable energy and make it something that is understood and appreciated would really help. Our Renewable Energy Day, we get it out into the schools and people come and visit the infrastructure and they get excited by it. They realise the potential for it and they really start to think about what it can achieve. I think it's all about education. So many things is about education, but if people become educated and appreciate renewable energy and what it can bring, I think that is the key to it.
Any other? Yes?
John Goss, Faculty of Health. Electric vehicles are going to boom in the next decade. What's the planning like with regard to electric charging stations in the Canberra region? Where are we up to?
I need to ask the ACT government. Would like to take that one? Jotzo, you got any ideas?
There's a strong movement.
In the mic. Just use the mic.
Do you know anything more about that, Kaveri? There is a strong movement supporting electric vehicles, but it's outside my area of expertise to really be able to talk about charging points and things like that. So I'm sorry if anyone else can help. That's wonderful. But
I think Mick Jefferson, I think, is on the board of it. He's now the new Minister for Planning, but he might have to review those roles. Okay.
Chris Mackenzie-Davey, I work for the New South Wales Government, and I know that a number of local councils are considering putting in charging points for electric vehicles as part of a sort of tourism drive. So I think being first off the rank with providing that, so people could drive out and have a fantastic cup of coffee, look at the woodworks, whatever it is, and charge their vehicle while they're there. So
just on the charges and that, I mean, in Australia we have a terrific late mover advantage here, right? I mean, we'll be one of the last countries, developed countries, that has significant amount of electrification of transport, because the local benefits of electrification are not quite as salient because our cities aren't nearly as congested as many in Asia and Europe, and noise and pollution aren't quite such a big concern here, and so we'll be later. And so we have the chance of avoiding, some of the lock-in into the wrong kind of charges, right? So I don't know, that would be my guess. We'll come quite late and then install the stuff that actually works for the long term.
Next question.
Hi, John Sibley, Environment Sustainable Development, or Environment and Planning now. On electric vehicles, we have 2 electric vehicle charges in our basement at work, actually, and there's a few around.
2 electric vehicles.
electric vehicles. There's a few around ACT government. Actually, Qiao was developing a commercial product with Better Place, and that was discontinued. I think the market currently is at a bit of a stalemate in terms of infrastructure versus technology costs and things like that. But I think you're right, it will turn around. But my question is mainly to Qiao and Morris, and that's if you look at the history of renewable energy and carbon policy in Australia, there's been a lot of resistance from mainstream industry, be it coal industry, be it from networks, and in a way what's happened federally now is a bit of a sort of a victory for those interests over renewable energy. And as an independent power producer who is both advocating for renewable energy and as well as trying to get actual projects up off the ground, what has your experience been of interfacing with, I guess, the sort of mainstream fossil fuel dominated networks and generators in Australia?
The approach which we have in terms of this IPP platform is mainly, as I mentioned, it's a platform that we've set up in China. Obviously, in Australia, it's a different environment for this. This whole system in Australia is currently a more of a coal-dominated, fossil fuel dominated market, where independent power producer for renewable energy is much more difficult and much more challenging. At present, we do not see that it is quite viable to set up an IPP to hold such assets in Australia, but we do see that there is possibility to set up something like a yieldco to hold just renewable assets themselves off the back of other offtake agreements.
So what we're seeing in Australia, just confirming, like the whole industry's, the energy industry in Australia is mainly dominated by the fossil fuel. Actually, that is actually quite a similar situation in China. So China, more than 80% of the energy mix is from coal. So that's actually a very similar situation in Australia also. But the thing is that I think if you reflect over into China, the governments over there, they're realizing that over the past 2 decades, what Frank has said, that coal has actually made a huge impact on the environment. So if people know, air quality, say for example in Beijing, is not that good, due to probably the coal power plants around the city and stuff. So it's really up to what the community wants and what the government can actually facilitate. So if you look at China, they've got a very ambitious target of rolling out 10 gigawatts, actually 12 gigawatt this year worth of solar on an annual basis for the next 5 years. So you're looking at actually a huge significant volume of renewables. I think Australia, reconfirming what Frank has said, Australia in the technology arena is a late stage adopter. So that in that sense, sometimes that's an advantage. So I think sooner or later, even though the federal government is trying to water down the MRET target, but moving forward, this is an inevitable exercise which is being practiced globally. So once governments in Australia start learning from overseas governments such as Denmark, Europe, other Asian countries, they'll see the benefit of renewables. So I think it's a timing issue rather than a really like some sort of other issue. So inevitably we'll get there. Yeah.
Next question. Yes, 2 questions here. Oh, 3. Just over there first. Can you just speak up? I can't quite hear it. No. You might have to grab another microphone. Go for a run.
Go for a run. Yeah. I'm from a couple of local community organizations called Sea Change and Solar Share. Questions mainly to Frank. There is a view that even if the worst scenario comes by, which is abolition of carbon tax and RET, renewable energy target, or watering down of RET, that the new price equations of solar panels, particularly solar energy, are such that it'll continue to be a self-sustaining model. Is the market really there yet? In terms of pure economics, is it sustainable? With RET gone and carbon price gone, do you think the solar energy industry in Australia will go forward?
Okay, I'll probably answer that one. Our company, we've been modeling the pricing of the products and also the market here in Australia. I think if you look at renewable energy, in particular solar, you can actually section that down into a centralized generation and distributed generation. So if you look at distributed generation, these are systems where, say for example, everyday household installs a residential system on their rooftop. So that's called what you call a distributed generation. And the bigger power plants, which is 50 megawatts or 20 megawatts, these are the centralized generations. In Australia, with the removal of carbon tax and also, say, the removal of the MRET, distributed generation will more than likely to be able to stand on its own 2 feet because of the beauty of distributed generation is it bypasses the network cost. So if you look at your bills, the bulk of the cost isn't the generation part, it's the network cost. So for distributed generation, that's where you're comparing. But for the centralized big generators, that won't be able to actually stand on its own 2 feet if the carbon tax is taken away or the MRET is abolished. Yeah. So if you look at the solar or renewable, you have to look at distributed and centralized generation. Yep.
Great discussions. And I think there was one more over here and then over here.
2 questions, one to the panel generally. I'm a farmer from Crookwell who is hoping to host turbines one day, wind turbines, large-scale turbines. I've been a strong advocate for community ownership for a long time, as in the developer of the wind farm not selling but giving a portion of that entity to the local community. Do you think that idea, that model is economically feasible? And my second question is, I think it was Liz, somebody alluded to the development of new storage technology. And I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, please.
So I'll probably answer the first question, Chuck can answer the second question. So the first question comes down to community solar ownership of generation assets. We're a big supporter of that concept because we believe that as a developer coming into a community and putting up renewable energy generations, the community should also have a piece of the action. So we believe that developers like us, we've got plans for projects where the community can actually have a piece of that action, inviting the community for the first, the community has the first right or refusal to uptake a portion of that generation asset allocated to that community. So that really then becomes like a self-sustaining model. Because renewable generation is a very steady, if you look at it from an economic point of view, it's a very steady revenue stream. And if you look at Australia, we've got the world's either the 3rd or the 4th largest super fund pool. And a lot of self-managed super fund is becoming more and more popular. But there's very limited investment opportunities. So, communities can actually tap in, using their own self-managed super fund, tapping into these projects which has a long-term tenure. Yeah.
We've done some investigations for both small-scale storage and large-scale commercial storage systems that could be potentially integrated into our solar farm at Mugger Lane. For the commercial scale and the small-scale storage systems, we see that there is benefit in having a retail license accompany the generator to maximize the benefit of selling the electricity at the correct time of the day to provide the benefit to the community. And that's sort of around 12 to 24 months down the track where we see that the economics will eventually stack up. I mean, for a wind developer yourself, is that right? Or you're... Yeah, okay, so if you're in partnership with a wind developer, you know, we can work something out between a wind farm, a solar farm, and an energy storage system that will work together collaboratively to deliver a fairly stable energy mix for a sizable customer base.
And Liz, did you want to comment on that?
Thanks, Barbara. Only to say that I wish when you asked that question, Bob, I had thought to say that that was quite generally I responded to your question, but more specifically, yes, the Danish model has got percentages of ownership that goes to community in a wind farm or a renewable energy infrastructure. So you know, working out an ownership model where it's shared, where the benefit is shared, is a really good way to address that. Yeah.
Okay, and there's one over here next.
Yeah. Toby Roxburgh
I
from...
should say, just Toby Roxburgh, Dorte Eklund and Frank Jotzo are also members of the ACT Climate Change Council with myself. Welcome.
Thank you. So that's one of my hats. I'm also an energy consultant for AECOM and the chair of the Australian Institute of Energy. So in some of the questions, we've got a seminar next month on peak demand. So if you're interested in that side of the discussion, then feel free to come along. I'm also a member of SERE. Sorry, Liz, yes. I need to add my fourth hat now.
Did you have a question?
I did. It's how is the ACT... we're only at the start of the journey of promoting the ACT as a hub here for renewable energy, and I know Zhenfa is a key part of that initial journey. I'm interested to see how much has that, I guess, pollinated over to China, and how much awareness is of Australia policy and the ACT policy getting into international countries so far.
Let me try to structure an answer to that question. So since the we were selected as a successful proponent last year in late August. During the announcement, we organised delegations from China to actually participate and learn from what the ACT government is actually doing in Australia. Interesting enough, even though China has a very ambitious target of 12 gigawatts worth of solar for the next 5 years continuously, so that's probably 40, 50 gigawatts worth of solar. The interesting is that ACT is a very tight community, tight community. We don't have a very big population. 90% is still very, very ambitious. So when this information was relayed back to China, a lot of the mainstream medias in China were reporting about this. So there were official government medias, and there were online medias reporting how ambitious a jurisdiction in Australia is responding to climate change and also the energy mix. That was actually a very positive message that was sent back. That actually had a lot of policymakers in China which started to thinking how they should improve their policy in China. So this is more like a two-way information exchange channel. So it's a learning process. So there's a lot to learn for the Australian government to learn from overseas, and overseas learning from Australia. And this journey has just started. So we've got 3 solar farms. Well, we've got 1 nearly up and running, 2 in the pipeline to be built, and we've got more wind coming. That definitely sends a very strong signal across Australia and also internationally, because there's only a handful of jurisdictions around the world which actually sets out a 90% renewable energy target. Yeah.
That's right, and I think Frank wants to comment. I just say I was in a meeting in Athens just a couple of weeks ago, and there was such international interest in a national capital anywhere in the world going for 90% by 2020. I thought it was amazing. So don't underestimate the interest people have. Frank?
I do a bit of work in China. I must say, though, I haven't met anyone yet who has heard of the ACT target. The thing that in my experience gets noted in China, in Beijing in any case, is the Australian carbon pricing mechanism, which is seen as an innovative policy that has some features that are seen as potentially attractive for Chinese emissions trading scheme if and when there is a national one. There are 7 pilot trading schemes in China, and I know that each of those teams has in fact studied the Australian carbon pricing mechanism and looked at elements of it to emulate or copy or consider. In terms of the 90%, it's great to hear that has actually in fact been receiving some airplay.
We're going to have to come to a close, sorry, because it's past time already, but the conversation will continue outside and our speakers will join us. So sometimes those more informal conversations are even more beneficial. So I'd like you really to join with me in thanking a really fantastic group of presentations.